Hello, BookTube. I am doing a bit of BookTube catch up this weekend. A whole bunch of BookTube events that are ongoing that I've been loving. I've been participating in them. I just haven't been talking about them or making videos. And I want to keep making them as long as light allows. I have mentioned before that Hyde Cottage here swallows light. It just swallows light, which is ordinary under normal circumstances. I don't object to that at all. It makes it actually nicer because little shaded lamps give cute little pools of light that are perfectly adequate. But they're not adequate for making videos. So I want to do a few more of these. I'm using the iPad. That's why I need good light, so that I have the contrast to show you what I'm talking about. And I want to talk about Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, a book club that was started by Michael K Vaughan on his channel right about the same time that I started the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club on my channel. And Roger, the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club, I decided to take a chance, and we're going to be talking about books that are not in the common domain. You will have to get them somehow. Either request them in a library and wait and hope that the timing is right, or buy a used copy. You'll have to do that. Whereas with Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, all of it is available online as a free download from Project Gutenberg or a million sites like that. So you won't be out of money at all unless you want a particular edition. Like, for instance, in his announcement video, Michael held up an old Penguin classic of his book for the first month of Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, The Prisoner of Zenda by Anthony Hope. In order to get that old Penguin classic, you would have to pay money. I have a customized version, as you can see. But this is, I want to talk just a little about this because this is, all of the picks for Roger's Book Club are inspired in one way or another. As is true, if you watch Mike's channel, you know that his enthusiasm never flags. But the books he talks about reel drunkenly between great things. He has a great video on Herodotus, for instance, but a whole bunch of classics too, and books that, let's just say, aren't great. And he's fuming if he's watching this, but he knows I'm right. In other words, he likes what he likes. We've all learned over the years here in this neighborhood of BookTube that there's nothing wrong with that at all. That is perfectly fine. And how many of you have been induced to some really good reading experiences by listening to his enthusiasm? Absolutely, plenty of people have. But this first month, The Prisoner of Zenda is not one of those books. Reading this again was utterly delightful. This reminded me of how much I enjoyed this book. It has a few anachronistic creaks to it. It creaks a little here and there, and you'll notice that. As a 2023 reader, you'll notice that. You don't have to be a blue-haired, blue check mark on Twitter. You don't have to be woke, in other words, in the negative sense of that word, to notice, for instance, the characterizations of the genders in this book, the characterizations of women in this book. Although one of the characters in this book who risks the most and is the most courageous is one of the foremost female characters. She just isn't involved in the incessant sword fighting that happens in this book. I'd forgotten how no wonder Michael K. Vaughan loves this thing. No wonder he does. There is a cheap pulp novel inside Prisoner of Zenda straining to get out. This is straining to be the 13th John Carter of Mars novel. It isn't. It's better than that. But you can feel it straining to happen. This came out in 1884, and it was a huge success for Anthony Hope. He never wrote anything that even came close to it. It was immediately embraced by the plastic media, immediately stage plays and movie versions, because it's the story of identical lookalikes in a pocket little kingdom in Europe, Ruritania. And the whole point of it spawned a whole kind of fiction, as I mentioned on this channel a little earlier. It spawned a whole kind of fiction called Ruritanian fiction. Everybody wanted to try their hand at this at the time, 100 years ago, because one of the essential appeals of Ruritanian fiction is that in a saner age, because we're dealing with the monarchy, a lot was at stake. Everything was at stake. Whether or not your king was who he says he was, it wasn't like the Count of Monte Cristo, where yes, there is something like that, but how much is at stake really? Here we're talking about the king. Is the person on the throne actually the king of Ruritania, or is he not? And once upon a time, 100 years ago, people had the sense to care about such things. That's what this is. King to be Rudolph of Ruritania has been drugged and he's not going to be in any shape for his own coronation. And that's a cause for concern. If you put it off, isn't all of Ruritania going to wonder why? Aren't they going to want to see the prince? Even if he's putting off his coronation, aren't they going to want to know that why? Aren't they going to want to know that he's okay? Basically, it's the makings of a Ruritanian incident, maybe even a European incident, if it happens. Except that Prince Rudolph is a distant cousin of an English family, and one of the people in that family is a guy named Rassendyll. It's the family of the Rassendyll family, and Rudolph Rassendyll just happens to be an absolute dead ringer for King Rudolph. And just happens, he gets an invitation to the coronation. So he is in Ruritania when this whole incident happens. And by coincidence, and oh my God, don't start a drinking game about the coincidences in this book, or you will have alcohol poisoning by chapter 2. By a sheer coincidence, he is discovered by some of the king's most trusted advisors, and they say, by golly, you look exactly like the king. Maybe you could stand in at the coronation. That appears to work. You can see already that this has gone nowhere. These kinds of ideas have gone nowhere. They have stuck around in pop culture. In fact, Ruritanian fiction became a wave of stuff on its own. Michael K. Vaughan's beloved Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote a Ruritanian novel. Also, George McCutcheon, an author I absolutely love, who's now totally forgotten. No one reads him anymore. But he wrote a series of books. He wrote a lot of books, and I love every one of them. But my favorite books by McCutcheon are his Graustark novels. That was his name for his Ruritanian pocket kingdom, was the kingdom of Graustark. I love those books so much. Absolutely. I love them, in fact, scandalously more than I love The Prisoner of Zenda and the sequel to The Prisoner of Zenda. I shouldn't, but I do. And I want to show you a picture here. Since I've got the iPad here, I want to show you a couple of pictures. In case you're thinking, oh God, well, that sounds like fun, but it also sounds like mindless melodrama. I mean, the king's identical twin shows up just because they're distant cousins. He shows up in the kingdom and no one can tell. They're expecting that to work on Ruritanians. I would like to show you 2 pictures. Okay? Just as a small demonstration. There's picture number 1. And there is picture number 2. The same guy, right? The same guy, right? I'm showing you a picture of the same guy. I'm not. I'm not showing you a picture of the same guy. This guy's the King of England. This guy's the Tsar of Russia. So, and from 100 years ago, from around the time when this book was in the imagination bloodstream. So let's get that idea straight out of our heads, okay? That this earlier reading group was somehow mindlessly naive, right? Pictures don't lie. You wouldn't be able to pick those 2 people out of a lineup as being different from each other. So there's a bit of a verisimilitude here that we can go with. It's not quite as brainless as that, but the plan goes wrong. Because Prince, now King Rudolph, isn't where he's supposed to be. Yes, he was drugged, but he's also abducted. So he's the prisoner of Zenda. He's not around anymore, and our good guys have to band together to find him, free him, and defeat the evil counselor who, I guess, wants control, right? If you know for sure that the identical twin, the identical person in power isn't the person they claim to be, and you would only know that if you were evil, if you were involved in the plot. Think of the movie Dave, right? Think of the character Frank Langella plays. He thinks he has complete control over Dave because he knows that Dave is an imposter, right? The classic line, we're walking. That is basically Prisoner of Zenda, only with no sword fighting, unfortunately. And as a result of that plot, our characters have to find the king. They have to break him out. There are 2 levels of romance. 2 main female characters involved here. Each with their own agenda and each deeply involved in the plot. So I don't know where, yes, modern sensibilities will notice that, of course, the women would never take up a sword and fight. But I don't think this book offends anywhere near as much as other books of the time period tend to do, including McCutcheon's Graustark books, actually, now that I think about it. Although Emily of Graustark is such a wonderful heroine. But anyway, this, in case I haven't given you the impression already, this book is pure hyperactive melodrama. Exquisitely enjoyable, hyperactive melodrama. It's told mostly from the point of Rassendyll himself, and he is kind of a fop with a good fencing record. Imagine Bertie Wooster the same background, the same area, same complete idleness. He tells us right at the beginning of the book. I think it's at the beginning. It might be in the middle. He has a bit of a crisis of conscience. It might be there, but he tells us, I'm idle. I don't do anything, and I don't want to do anything. I'm part of the moneyed upper classes. Why would I even think of that? So think of Bertie Wooster only as a crack shot. Bertie Wooster is not. Nothing that he does, that Bertie Wooster tries to do, happens right. He can't even puncture the right hot water bottle. Whereas Rassadil is totally capable. He is an action hero waiting to happen. I think, myself, that you could do a slam bang fantastic modern movie adaptation of this book that was completely faithful and that every viewer would love. It has that kind of unbelievably solid architecture to it. It's just a delight to read. So it was a great choice to start off Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. I thought I would weigh in on it because I want to know how, for instance, how many of you are joining Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, but I also want to know whether or not you're tempted by the choices involved here. I would say that some of the choices in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club are the joy that you get from subscribing to Mike's channel and loving it, and some of the other choices are the price you pay for subscribing to his channel and loving it. And I think you should do both. I certainly am going to do both. So that is the one video I'm going to make for Prisoner of Zenda. Do not look for this cover in bookstores. This is custom, so you cannot find it. But I'm going to wrap this up. I wanted to do a little bit of booktube catch up. I think I am out of useful light to do any more. I wasn't counting on that. Such poor lighting here. I'll probably have to do the rest of them tomorrow. But I'll wrap this up and I will be back. Thank you, booktube.